When a billionaire tech mogul humiliated the wrong waitress in Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant, he thought he'd won. Instead, her perfect response in flawless Basque, a language he barely spoke himself, ignited a chain reaction that would destroy his empire within 72 hours. What he didn't know: the quiet woman serving his table wasn't just any waitress. She was a linguistic genius forced into survival mode, and the investor sitting across from him was already recording everything. Stay with me until the end of this story, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this journey travels. The reservation book at Aurelius called it the Callaway Table, Table 7, positioned dead center beneath the Italian crystal chandelier where everyone who mattered could see and be seen. On a Thursday night in late September, that's where Ethan Callaway sat, 32 years old and worth more money than most people could conceptualize, watching his reflection fragment across the mirrored walls of Manhattan's most aggressively exclusive restaurant. He looked good. He knew it. 6'2", dark hair styled with just enough product to suggest effort without desperation, wearing a Tom Ford suit that cost what most Americans made in a month. The watch on his wrist, a limited edition Patek Philippe, had appreciated 40% since he'd bought it 18 months ago. Everything about Ethan Callaway appreciated: his net worth, his influence, his carefully cultivated reputation as the youngest self-made tech billionaire to crack the Fortune 500. Everything except his patience. "They're 12 minutes late," he said, not looking at Marcus, his head of operations, who sat to his left scrolling through projections on a tablet. Marcus didn't look up. "Traffic from JFK is a nightmare right now." "Then they should have left earlier." Across from him, Victoria Hale, 63, silver-haired, terrifyingly sharp, sipped her mineral water and said nothing. She'd flown in from London specifically for this dinner, specifically to discuss a merger that would value Ethan's company, Callaway Technologies, at $8.4 billion. The kind of number that didn't just change your life, it changed your legacy. Ethan had spent 6 months courting her. 6 months of calls and presentations and carefully orchestrated social encounters designed to demonstrate that he wasn't just another tech wunderkind who'd gotten lucky. He was the real thing: visionary, ruthless, someone who understood that sentiment was weakness and control was everything. "Relax," Victoria said finally, setting down her glass with a soft click against the white tablecloth. "You're wound tighter than my grandson's tennis racket." "I don't relax. Relaxation is how empires collapse." She studied him with those pale gray eyes that had stared down hostile boards and crumbling markets for 4 decades. "How old is your daughter now? 5? 6. Emma just turned 6. And she lives with you full-time?" "Her mother died when she was 2. Ethan delivered this information the way he delivered most personal facts. Flat, efficient, designed to shut down follow-up questions. "I have full custody. A nanny handles the day-to-day." "Does she?" Something in Victoria's tone made Ethan's jaw tighten, but before he could respond, a waitress appeared at his elbow. She materialized so quietly he actually startled, which annoyed him. "Good evening," she said softly. "Can I start you with anything besides water?" Ethan glanced up, already dismissing her. Mid-30s maybe, dark hair pulled back in a bun so tight it probably gave her headaches, wearing the restaurant's standard black uniform that somehow looked cheaper on her than it did on the other staff. She kept her eyes down, focused on her notepad with an intensity that suggested she'd rather be literally anywhere else. "Bourbon," he said. "Blanton's. Neat." "Of course." "Actually," Marcus looked up from his tablet. "What bourbons do you have?" The waitress, her name tag read Lily, recited the list without hesitation. 15 different bottles, including several Ethan knew for a fact weren't on the standard menu. Her voice barely rose above a murmur, but her pronunciation was perfect. Too perfect. It irritated him in a way he couldn't immediately articulate. Victoria ordered a gin martini. Marcus decided on scotch. The waitress nodded, scribbling notes Ethan suspected were unnecessary. She'd remember their orders without writing them down, he could tell, and started to retreat. "Wait," Ethan said. She stopped, turned back, still wouldn't meet his eyes directly. "How long have you worked here?" 3 years, sir." "You like it?" Finally, she looked at him, just for a second. Her eyes were dark brown, almost black, and completely unreadable. It pays the bills. Not the answer he'd expected. Most service workers, when addressed directly by someone like Ethan Calloway, someone whose name they absolutely recognized because everyone in New York's upper echelon recognized the Calloway name, they performed. Smiled too wide, laughed too hard, angled for connection. This woman just wanted him to let her leave. "Well," he said, leaning back in his chair, "try to look a little happier about it. People pay good money to eat here. They don't want to see misery serving their food." The silence that followed lasted maybe 3 seconds. It felt longer. "Yes, sir," Lily said quietly. "I'll work on that." She left. Victoria was looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "What?" Ethan said. "Nothing." She picked up her menu. "Just making observations." 20 minutes later, the drinks arrived, delivered by a different waiter, Ethan noticed, and his remaining executives finally showed up full of apologies about construction on the Van Wyck. They slid into their seats, ordered quickly, and the dinner began in earnest. This was Ethan's element. The negotiation, the careful dance of power where every word mattered and weakness meant death. He guided the conversation like a conductor, pulling focus when needed, letting Victoria hold court when strategic, always aware of how the room perceived him. By the time their appetizers arrived, he'd successfully framed the merger as Victoria's idea. By the main course, his CFO had walked her team through projections that made $8.4 billion look conservative. Everything was proceeding exactly as Ethan had planned. Then Victoria said something in rapid Italian, a joke from the way Marcus laughed, and Ethan felt that familiar spike of irritation. He spoke 3 languages fluently: English, Spanish, and Mandarin. Italian he could fumble through. But Victoria knew at least 7, maybe 8, and she wielded them like weapons, constantly reminding everyone in the room that her experience dwarfed theirs. The waitress, Lily, reappeared to refill water glasses. She moved around the table like a ghost, present but deliberately invisible. Most of the executives didn't even glance at her. Ethan watched her refill Victoria's glass with mechanical precision, and an idea sparked. Cruel, maybe, definitely unnecessary. But the bourbon had smoothed his edges just enough to blur the line between confidence and arrogance, and he wanted to impress Victoria. Wanted to show her he wasn't just some American tech bro who spoke Mandarin because it was good for business. "Excuse me," he said, catching Lily's attention as she reached for his glass. She looked at him, wary now, and Ethan began speaking in Basque. He'd learned it in college, a semester abroad in Bilbao, more interested in the surfing than the studies, but he'd picked up enough to get by. It was a notoriously difficult language, unrelated to any other European tongue, spoken by maybe 750,000 people worldwide. He'd kept it sharp over the years through podcasts and apps, mostly because it made good party conversation. Look at the tech genius who speaks the impossible language. "I want to place a special order," he said in Basque, watching her face for the confusion he expected. "Not on the menu. Tell the chef I want the sea bass, but prepared Basque style. Marmitaco. Understand? With the peppers and the tomatoes like they make it in Getaria. And bring it with a chacoli from the Getariaco region. Something dry. Something that pairs with shellfish." He sat back, satisfied. The order itself was impossible. The restaurant didn't serve Basque cuisine, didn't stock chacoli, and probably couldn't source the right peppers if they tried. But that wasn't the point. The point was watching this woman fumble, apologize, admit she had no idea what he'd just said while Victoria and his executives watched her squirm. The point was control. Lily stood very still for a moment. Her expression didn't change. Then she opened her mouth, and what came out shattered the entire room. "Ezet, sir," she said quietly, in perfect Basque. "The restaurant doesn't prepare marmitaco, and we don't carry texacoli. But if you're craving northern Spanish cuisine, I can recommend the grilled octopus with pimenton. It's not traditional Basque, but the preparation is similar. Or if you prefer fish, the branzino is excellent tonight. As for wine, we have an Albarino from Rias Baixas that pairs beautifully with seafood, though I realize it's Galician rather than Basque." She paused. "Also, sir, you made 2 grammatical errors in your request. You said pepperek when you meant piperek, for peppers. And your conjugation of ekari, to bring, was in the wrong tense. The correct phrase would be ekar ezazu, for the imperative form." The chandelier seemed to hum in the silence. Ethan felt his face go hot. Around the table, he could see his executives suddenly finding their plates fascinating. Marcus had actually covered his mouth with his hand. And Victoria. Victoria was smiling, not broadly, just a slight upturn at the corners of her mouth that somehow communicated more amusement than outright laughter would have. "The octopus," Ethan managed. His voice came out rough. "Fine, that's fine. Excellent choice, sir." Lily jotted something on her pad. "And the albarino?" "Whatever you recommend." "Very good." She collected their menus. Ethan had forgotten they still had menus, and disappeared back toward the kitchen. The moment she was out of earshot, Marcus let out a sound somewhere between a cough and a suppressed laugh. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. "Did she just—" "Not now," Ethan snapped. But Victoria was already leaning forward, her eyes bright with something Ethan didn't like. Interest. Real interest. "That was extraordinary," she said. "How many people in New York do you think speak Basque? 100? 200? I have no idea. And you just found 1 serving tables at Aurelius." She shook her head slowly. "What are the odds?" "Coincidence." Ethan reached for his bourbon, realized his glass was empty, and set it down harder than intended. "Lucky guess, maybe. She probably heard me mispronounce something and took a shot." "Did you hear her accent? It was perfect. Northern dialect, if I'm not mistaken, probably from around San Sebastian or Guitarria, the region you mentioned." Victoria sat back, studying him. "That woman didn't guess, Ethan. She speaks the language fluently." "So what? It doesn't mean anything." "Doesn't it?" The conversation moved on. It had to. They were here for business. But Ethan couldn't focus. His mind kept returning to the waitress, to her quiet voice making him look like an idiot in front of the most important investor he'd ever courted. The humiliation sat in his chest like a stone. Dinner continued. The food arrived, probably excellent, though Ethan barely tasted it. His executives made small talk. Victoria told a story about negotiating with a Russian oligarch in 3 languages simultaneously. Everyone laughed at the right moments, and Ethan sat there, chewing octopus that tasted like ashes, plotting. When dessert came, he didn't remember ordering it. Lily returned with their plates. She set a chocolate torte in front of Victoria with murmured description of the components. Did the same for Marcus. Reached Ethan last. "Crema catalana," she said softly, placing the dish before him. "The chef thought you might appreciate something traditional to the region, given your earlier request." She said it in English, but Ethan heard the subtle dig. "The region you claim to know so well." "How long have you spoken Basque?" he asked. His voice came out colder than intended. Lily paused, her hand still on his plate. "I studied linguistics in graduate school. Basque was one of my focus languages." "Graduate school." He let the words hang there, weighted with skepticism. "For how long?" 5 years. "And you left to become a waitress." It wasn't a question. It was an accusation, and everyone at the table heard it. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. One of the junior executives suddenly became very interested in her phone. Lily's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes. Pain, maybe. Or anger buried so deep it had fossilized. "Life happens," she said quietly. "Not everyone gets to finish what they start." She left before Ethan could respond. Victoria was looking at him again, and this time there was no amusement in her expression. Just disappointment, the kind his 3rd-grade teacher used to give him when he pulled other kids' chairs out from under them during assembly. "That was unkind," she said. "I asked a question." "You belittled her." "I don't think someone working food service gets to play the victim card when asked about their career choices." "No?" Victoria set down her fork with a soft clink. "I don't think I want dessert after all." The rest of dinner passed in strained politeness. They discussed quarterly projections and market positioning and all the other details that should have excited Ethan, but now felt hollow. Victoria left first, pleading jet lag, though it was barely 9:30. His executives scattered soon after. By 10, Ethan sat alone at table 7, finishing the bourbon he'd ordered 45 minutes earlier while the restaurant slowly emptied around him. He should have let it go. Should have paid the check, gone home to his penthouse where Emma slept under the watch of her overnight nanny, poured another drink, and moved on with his life. Instead, he watched Lily clear tables across the dining room, watched how she moved, efficient, invisible, careful not to draw attention. watched other customers barely acknowledge her existence while she refilled their water and removed their plates and smiled that same practiced smile that never reached her eyes. A linguistics scholar. Graduate school, 5 years. What kind of disaster did it take to fall from that to this? Ethan pulled out his phone and texted his head of security. Need background on someone. Full workup. Name is Lily Navarro. Works at Aurelius restaurant. Everything. Family, finances, education, employment history. I want it tomorrow morning. The response came back in seconds. On it. He paid the check. Left exactly 15%, not a dollar more, and walked out into the September night feeling something ugly coil in his chest. Not guilt. Ethan Calloway didn't do guilt, but something adjacent to it. Some combination of wounded pride and simmering anger that demanded satisfaction. The drive home took 12 minutes. His penthouse occupied the top 3 floors of a building in Tribeca that he'd bought outright, cash, 2 years ago. Marble everything. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Hudson. Art he'd purchased because people told him it was important, not because he particularly liked it. He checked in on Emma, 6 years old, dark curls spread across her pillow, clutching a stuffed elephant that had seen better days. His daughter. The one pure thing in his life, though if he was honest with himself, he had no idea how to be her father. He knew how to provide for her, knew how to hire the best nannies and enroll her in the best schools and make sure her trust fund would dwarf his own childhood assets. But actually be there? Actually show up? That was harder. He closed her door quietly and went to his office, poured bourbon into a crystal tumbler, and stared out at the city lights while his mind replayed the dinner on loop. The waitress's face, Victoria's disappointment, the subtle shift in power he'd felt when Lily corrected his grammar in front of everyone. His phone buzzed at 6:47 the next morning. The security report, detailed and devastating. Lily Navarro, 30 years old. Born in Queens to a Puerto Rican father and Irish mother, both deceased, mother from cancer 8 years ago, father still alive but incapacitated. Bachelor's degree in linguistics from NYU, full scholarship. Master's from Columbia, partial scholarship. Started a PhD program in historical linguistics at Princeton. And then everything stopped. 4 years ago, her father, Miguel Navarro, suffered a massive stroke that left him paralyzed on his left side and requiring round-the-clock care. Lily withdrew from Princeton 6 months into her doctoral program, moved back to New York, started working at Aurelius 3 years ago. The financial section made Ethan wince despite himself. Medical debt, $347,000. Credit cards, maxed out at $43,000. Student loans, $127,000, currently in forbearance. Her father lived in a nursing facility in Queens that cost $8,000 a month. She paid it by working 60-hour weeks, splitting her time between Aurelius and weekend catering gigs. No savings, no assets, no safety net, just a woman drowning slowly, one shift at a time. There was more. Her dissertation topic, her academic publications, letters of recommendation from Princeton professors calling her brilliant and once in a generation. But Ethan stopped reading. He had what he needed. He had her weakness. And Ethan Calloway had built an empire on exploiting weakness. He sat at his desk for a long time, watching the sun rise over Manhattan, and made a decision that would destroy both their lives. He called Marcus first. I need you to make a call to Aurelius, today. Okay. Marcus sounded wary. What kind of call? Tell them the waitress from last night, Lily Navarro, was inappropriate. Tell them she violated customer privacy, made personal comments, created an uncomfortable environment. Say I'm considering not returning to the restaurant unless they handle it. Silence on the other end. Then, Ethan, that's not... Are you refusing?
No, she didn't actually do anything wrong. She answered your question in Basque, that's all. She embarrassed me in front of Victoria Hale. You embarrassed yourself. The words hung in the air between them. Ethan felt his jaw clench. Make the call, Marcus, or I'll find someone who will. Another pause. Longer this time. Then Marcus sighed, the sound of a man calculating the cost of his mortgage against his conscience. I'll handle it. He hung up. Ethan sat there, bourbon half finished, watching commuters stream across the Brooklyn Bridge like ants. His phone buzzed with emails, his assistant confirming meetings,
His lawyer asking about contract revisions, his daughter's nanny sending a photo of Emma eating breakfast. He ignored all of them. At 9:15, Marcus texted, "Done." They fired her. 3 words. That's all it took to end someone's life. Ethan should have felt satisfied, should have felt that surge of power that came from proving he could still control things, still bend the world to his will, even when it tried to humiliate him. Instead, he felt nothing. He went to the office, sat through meetings, reviewed projections, made decisions that affected thousands of employees and millions of dollars, performed the role of Ethan Callaway, billionaire genius, while some part of him watched from a distance and wondered when exactly he'd become the villain in his own story. That night, Emma asked him to read her a bedtime story. He tried, got through maybe 5 pages of some book about a rabbit who made friends with a fox, but his mind kept drifting, kept seeing Lily's face, the careful blankness she'd maintained when he asked about her career. Life happens. Not everyone gets to finish what they start. "Daddy?" He looked down. Emma was watching him with those huge brown eyes, her mother's eyes, the only part of Rachel he saw every day. "Yeah, baby?"
Why do you look sad? I'm not sad. You look it. He closed the book. Sometimes grown-ups have things on their mind. Doesn't mean anything. Mama used to look sad like that. The words hit harder than they should have. Rachel had been dead for 4 years. Emma shouldn't remember her at all, much less remember her expressions. But here she was, 6 years old and already cataloging grief. "Your mama loved you very much," Ethan said, which was true. "And so do I." "Then why do you go away all the time?" "I don't—" He stopped, started over. "My work is important, Em. It helps a lot of people. But you're not here." "I'm here right now." "Not really." She pulled her elephant closer. "You're thinking about work stuff. You always are." He had no answer to that, so he kissed her forehead, turned off the light, and left her room feeling like the world's worst father. Downstairs, he poured another bourbon and checked his phone. An email from Victoria's assistant, marked urgent. "Ms. Hale has requested a meeting to discuss the proposed merger. Monday, 2 p.m., her office. Please confirm attendance." Ethan stared at the message for a long time before responding. Something about the formal tone bothered him. Victoria usually communicated directly, not through assistants. And discuss the merger felt ominous in a way he couldn't articulate. But maybe he was paranoid. Maybe last night's awkwardness had blown over. He confirmed the meeting and went to bed, where he didn't sleep so much as drift through uneasy half-consciousness until his alarm pulled him back to reality. The weekend passed. He took Emma to the park, or rather, he took his phone to the park while Emma played on the swings under the nanny's supervision. He went to a charity gala Saturday night and made small talk with people whose names he forgot immediately. He reviewed the merger documents Sunday afternoon, looking for any detail he might have missed. None of it felt real. Monday morning, he woke up to a news alert. Callaway Technologies stock dips 3% on merger uncertainty. He sat up so fast his head spun, grabbed his phone, scrolled through financial news sites, his heart rate climbing with each headline. Victoria Hale. Reconsidering Callaway deal, sources say investors concerned about leadership stability at Callaway Technologies. Is Ethan Callaway's golden run over? No. No, this couldn't be happening. The merger was solid, the numbers were good, everything was in place. He called Victoria's office, got the assistant. "I need to speak with her immediately." "I'm afraid Ms. Hale is unavailable until your 2 o'clock meeting, Mr. Callaway." "Then move the meeting up. This needs to be addressed now." "I'll pass along your request." She hung up without confirming anything. The next 3 hours were torture. Ethan paced his office, refreshing stock prices, fielding increasingly panicked calls from board members and investors. By noon, Callaway Technologies had dropped another 2%. By 1:30, financial analysts were openly speculating about what went wrong. At 1:45, Ethan walked into Victoria Hale's office building in Midtown, a glass tower that housed empires, and took the elevator to the 47th floor with Marcus and his CFO in tow. Nobody spoke. The silence felt like a funeral. Victoria's assistant led them to a conference room overlooking Central Park. Spectacular view, floor-to-ceiling windows.
A table that could seat 20 but currently held only Victoria and two people Ethan didn't recognize. A man in an expensive suit who looked like a lawyer, and a woman with severe glasses who looked like she ate CEOs for breakfast. Ethan? Victoria didn't stand, didn't smile. Sit down. He sat. Marcus and the CFO flanked him like bodyguards, which suddenly felt appropriate. I'll get straight to it, Victoria said. The merger is off. The words didn't register at first. Ethan heard them, understood them individually, but couldn't fit them together into meaning. Excuse me? The merger. The deal we've been negotiating for 6 months. It's over. We're pulling out. Now his brain caught up, and with it came a surge of panic so intense he thought he might vomit. You can't. We have contracts, agreements. You can't just. Those agreements include morality clauses and good faith provisions that your behavior has violated. She slid a folder across the table. Open it. Ethan's hand shook as he flipped it open. Inside were printed emails, text messages, phone records, and at the top, a transcript of a phone call between Marcus and Aurelius's general manager. His own words documented. Tell them the waitress was inappropriate. Say I'm considering not returning unless they handle it. How did you get this? I have investigators, Ethan. Good ones. Better than yours, apparently. Victoria leaned back in her chair. When someone is about to become my business partner, I make sure I know exactly who they are. Not who they pretend to be. Who they actually are. He grasped for words, for some explanation that didn't make him sound like a monster. This is being taken out of context. That waitress, Lily Navarro. Her name is Lily Navarro. Fine, Lily Navarro embarrassed me in front of you and my entire executive team. I had every right to. To what? Destroy her livelihood? Get her fired based on lies? Victoria's voice stayed level, but something cold crept into it. You want to know what I did after our dinner Thursday night? I stayed late. I talked to the staff. I learned that Lily has worked at Aurelius for 3 years without a single complaint, that she supports her disabled father alone, that she gave up a PhD at Princeton to take care of him. She paused. I also learned that you spoke to her in Basque specifically to humiliate her, that you expected her to fail, to stumble, to make you look smart. And when she didn't, when she was better than you couldn't handle it. That's not... And then you called her boss and lied to get her fired. Victoria leaned forward now, and Ethan saw something in her eyes he'd never seen directed at him before. Contempt. You ruined someone's life because she wounded your ego. It was a business decision, Ethan said, hating how weak it sounded. Image matters in... Don't. The lawyer, or whoever he was, spoke for the first time. We have recordings, Mr. Calloway. We have documentation. If you try to spin this as anything other than what it is, we'll release everything to the press. The room tilted. Ethan gripped the table edge. You're blackmailing me. No, Victoria said quietly. I'm protecting my company from someone who has proven himself to be vindictive, petty, and dangerous. Do you have any idea what it says about you, about your character, that you would use your wealth and power to destroy someone powerless? Someone who did nothing wrong except be better at something than you were? She's a waitress. She was a scholar. Victoria's voice finally rose, just for a second before she pulled it back. She was brilliant. She was on track to become one of the foremost linguistics experts in the country. And life hit her with tragedy, and instead of walking away from her father, she sacrificed everything to care for him. Do you understand that, Ethan? She chose duty over ambition. She chose love over career, and you saw that sacrifice and decided to twist the knife deeper. Ethan couldn't speak. His throat had closed. I've been in business for 40 years, Victoria continued. I've worked with criminals. I've negotiated with dictators. I've sat across from men who would destroy entire companies to make a profit. But I've never, not once, met someone who felt the need to crush someone as defenseless as a waitress just to feel powerful. The deal? There is no deal. There will never be a deal. Not with you, not with your company, not while you're in charge. She stood. My legal team will send termination paperwork by close of business. Don't contact me again. She left. Her people followed, and Ethan sat there in that conference room overlooking Central Park with his executives beside him and his empire crumbling around him, finally understanding the magnitude of his mistake. By the time he made it back to his office, the stock had dropped 8%. By close of market, 12. His inbox overflowed with emails from investors demanding explanations, board members calling emergency meetings, business partners quietly distancing themselves. And somewhere in Queens, Lily Navarro probably sat in her father's nursing home room, wondering how she'd pay next month's bills, with no idea that her rejection of a billionaire's cruelty had just set off an explosion that would reshape both their lives forever. The nursing home smelled like industrial cleaner and something underneath it that no amount of bleach could cover. Lily had stopped noticing years ago, the same way she'd stopped noticing the fluorescent lights that hummed overhead, or the way her shoes squeaked on the linoleum as she walked down the hallway every morning at 7:15. Room 304. Always room 304. Her father sat by the window in his wheelchair, staring out at the parking lot like he'd been doing when she left yesterday. The stroke had taken his left side, but it had taken other things too. Things harder to quantify. The spark in his eyes, the quick laugh, the man who taught her to conjugate irregular verbs in Spanish before she could ride a bike. "Hey, Papa." Miguel Navarro turned his head slowly. The right side of his face smiled. The left stayed frozen. "Mija." His speech came thick, slurred. "You're early." "Day off," she lied, setting down the coffee she'd brought him. Decaf, doctor's orders, though she'd stopped telling him that. "Thought I'd spend some extra time." She didn't tell him she'd been fired Friday afternoon. Didn't tell him that the general manager of Aurelius had called her into his office, looking uncomfortable and angry in equal measure, and said that a very important client had complained about her conduct. Didn't tell him that she'd stood there, numb, while he explained that the restaurant couldn't afford to lose high-value customers over personality conflicts. Personality conflicts. That's what they'd called it. She'd asked what she'd done wrong. He wouldn't give specifics, just kept saying things like professional boundaries and customer comfort, and we have to make difficult decisions. She'd cleaned out her locker in under 5 minutes. 3 years of shifts reduced to a grocery bag of spare flats, and the cardigan she kept for when the AC ran too cold. The hostess, a 23-year-old named Amber who'd started 6 months ago, had whispered, "I'm sorry," as Lily walked past. Everyone else just looked away. "You look tired," her father said now, pulling her back to the present. "I'm fine." Lily. Even slurred, her name carried weight when he said it. "Don't lie to your old man." She pulled up the visitor's chair, the same one that had a broken wheel that made it list to the left. Sat down hard. "Just been a long week." "The restaurant?" "Yeah. Not technically a lie. The restaurant." They sat in silence for a while. Outside, someone's car alarm went off. Inside, a nurse walked past pushing a medication cart, wheels rattling. Her father reached for her hand with his good one, the right one, and squeezed. "You're a good daughter," he said. That almost broke her. Almost. But Lily had gotten very good at swallowing things down, at finding that place inside herself where feelings went to die quietly so she could keep functioning. She squeezed back. "You need anything? Want me to read to you?" "Tell me something in Basque." She blinked. "What?" "Basque. You used to practice on me, remember?" His smile went crooked. Before. The word that divided their entire lives now. Before the stroke, before Princeton, before Lily's mother died and left them trying to figure out how 2 people became a family when they had always been 3. "Papa, I haven't spoken Basque in years." "Try." So she did. Stumbled through a few phrases, her accent rustier than she'd realized until Thursday night, when muscle memory had kicked in and she'd responded to that billionaire's smug challenge without thinking. The memory made her throat tight. "Beautiful," her father said when she finished. "You were always so smart, Mija. Smarter than me, than your mother. We knew you'd do something important." "I'm doing important work," she said automatically. "Taking care of you is important." "That's not what I meant." "I know." She stayed until lunch came, some gray meat floating in gravy, vegetables boiled into submission, and helped him eat even though he didn't need help anymore. He could manage a fork with his right hand just fine. But this was their routine, and routines were all either of them had left. At 12:30, she kissed his forehead and left, walking past rooms full of people whose children visited once a month if they were lucky. At least she came every day. At least her father knew someone still cared. Small victories. Outside, the October sun felt too bright after the nursing home's dim hallways. Lily stood in the parking lot for a long moment, trying to figure out what to do with a Monday morning that should have been spent prepping the restaurant for lunch service. Her phone had $73 in her checking account. Rent was due in 12 days. The nursing home bill, $8,000, same as it was every month, would hit on the 15th. She had no plan, no backup, no safety net, just panic rising like floodwater. Her phone buzzed. A text from Carmen, one of the other waitresses at Aurelius. What happened? Manager won't say anything, but you're off the schedule. Lily typed back. Got fired. Don't know why. 3 dots appeared immediately. Disappeared. Appeared again. Then, that's insane. You want to get drinks tonight? Can't afford it. My treat. Lily almost said no. Almost drove back to her studio apartment in Astoria and spent the afternoon applying to every service job within a 10-mile radius. But the thought of sitting alone in that 400-square-foot box, staring at walls she couldn't afford to decorate, felt unbearable. Okay, where? They met at a dive bar in Queens at 7. Carmen was already there, nursing a beer and scrolling through her phone. She looked up when Lily walked in and immediately pulled her into a hug that lasted longer than comfortable. You okay? I've been better. They ordered, Carmen got another beer, Lily just water because every dollar counted now, and found a booth in the back where the music wasn't quite as loud. So what really happened? Carmen asked. I don't know. Friday afternoon, Carlos called me in and said a customer complained. Wouldn't tell me what I supposedly did, just said they had to let me go. That's illegal, isn't it? Firing someone without cause? New York is at-will employment. They can fire you for anything as long as it's not discrimination. Lily had looked it up Saturday morning down a rabbit hole of labor law websites that all confirmed what she already knew. She had no recourse, no protection. And I'm not going to sue. Can't afford a lawyer anyway. Carmen tore at her napkin, creating a small pile of shredded paper. Did something happen Thursday night? I saw you serving table 7. That was the Calloway party, right? The name made Lily's stomach clench. Yeah. And? And nothing. I took their orders, brought their food, did my job. She paused. One of them spoke to me in Basque. I responded. That was it. In Basque. Carmen stared at her. You speak Basque? I speak a lot of languages. It's what I studied. Right. The grad school thing. Carmen had heard pieces of Lily's story over 3 years of working together, but never the full picture. Most people didn't get the full picture. What'd you study again? Historical linguistics. How languages evolve, die, get preserved. Lily picked at the label on her water bottle. Basque was one of my specializations because it's a language isolate, not related to anything else in Europe. Some people think it's a remnant of pre-Indo-European languages, but there's no way to know for sure. She was talking too much, talking about the work she'd loved with a passion she hadn't felt in years, and it hurt like pressing on a bruise. That's actually cool as hell, Carmen said. Why'd you stop? My dad got sick. Someone had to take care of him. No other family? My mom died when I was 22. I'm an only child, so... Lily shrugged. It was me, or nobody. Carmen went quiet for a minute, processing. Then, you think the Basque thing is why they fired you? Because you showed off or something? I wasn't showing off. I was answering a question. I know, but rich people are weird about stuff like that. They don't like it when service workers are smarter than them. Threatens the natural order or whatever. Lily had thought the same thing approximately 800 times since Friday. Thought about the way Ethan Calloway had looked at her after she'd corrected his grammar. Thought about the subtle shift in his expression from smug confidence to something colder, meaner. Maybe, she said. You remember which one spoke Basque? The main guy, dark hair, expensive suit, looked like he'd never heard the word no in his life. Calloway himself, then. Ethan Calloway. Carmen pulled out her phone, typed something, turned the screen around. This him? Lily looked at the photo, a professional headshot from some business magazine, Ethan Calloway staring at the camera with the kind of confidence that came from always winning, and felt something cold settle in her chest. Yeah, that's him. He's worth like $8 billion. Good for him. No, I mean, Carmen leaned forward. If he complained about you, Carlos would do whatever he said, wouldn't even question it. You embarrassed a billionaire, Lily. In his mind, you had to be punished. It sounded insane. It sounded like a conspiracy theory cooked up by someone who spent too much time on the internet, but it also made a terrible kind of sense. So what do I do about it? Nothing. You can't. Carmen said it matter-of-factly, the way you'd explain gravity. People like that operate in a different world. They make a phone call, your life changes. That's just how it works. Lily thought about arguing, thought about saying something about justice or fairness or how the system was supposed to work. But she'd stopped believing in those things around year 2 of watching her father's medical bills pile up while insurance companies found creative reasons to deny coverage. The system worked great, just not for people like her. She went home at 9, caught the subway to Astoria, and climbed 3 flights of stairs to her apartment. Studio. 400 square feet. Murphy bed that didn't fold up right anymore. Kitchenette that consisted of a hot plate and a mini fridge. Bathroom so small you could sit on the toilet and wash your hands in the sink simultaneously. $850 a month, which was a steal for New York, which meant it was barely habitable. Lily sat on her bed and opened her laptop, started searching job listings, restaurants, catering companies, bars, cafes, anywhere that might hire someone with a gap in her resume and no references from her most recent employer. She applied to 14 places, writing the same cover letter over and over with minor variations. At midnight, her phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Is this Lily Navarro? A woman's voice, professional, British accent. Yes? My name is Catherine Shaw. I'm calling on behalf of Victoria Hale. The name meant nothing to Lily. She almost said so, then remembered. Victoria Hale had been at table 7 Thursday night, sitting across from Calloway, watching the whole Basque exchange with those sharp gray eyes. I'm sorry. I'm not sure why. Ms. Hale would like to meet with you. Are you available tomorrow afternoon? What? 2 o'clock if that works. Her office is in Midtown. Catherine rattled off an address that Lily scrambled to write down. Building security will have your name, 47th floor. Can I ask what this is about? Ms. Hale will explain everything when you meet. Will 2 o'clock work? Lily's mind raced. This was weird. This was possibly a trap. This was definitely something she should be more cautious about. Yes, she heard herself say. 2 o'clock works. Excellent. We'll see you then. Catherine hung up before Lily could ask any follow-up questions. She sat there holding her phone, staring at the address written in her shaky handwriting, trying to figure out what the hell just happened. Victoria Hale wanted to meet with her. The woman who'd been sitting at Ethan Calloway's table when everything went wrong wanted to meet with her. This was either the best thing that could happen or absolutely catastrophic, and Lily had no way of knowing which until it was too late. She didn't sleep that night, just lay in bed playing out scenarios, each more unlikely than the last. At 6, she gave up and showered, dug through her closet for something professional, landed on black slacks and a white blouse that she usually wore to catering gigs. They do. She visited her father at the normal time, didn't mention the mysterious meeting, listened to him talk about the physical therapist who'd worked with him yesterday, left at noon to give herself plenty of time to get to Midtown. The building was exactly as intimidating as the address suggested. Glass and steel, the kind of place where everyone walking through the lobby looked important and purposeful. Lily gave her name to security, got a visitor badge, and took an elevator that moved so smoothly she barely felt it until the doors opened on the 47th floor. The reception area had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, real art on the walls, furniture that probably cost more than Lily's yearly rent. A receptionist who looked like she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine smiled and said, "Miss Navarro, right this way." She led Lily down a hallway to an office that was somehow even more impressive than the lobby. And sitting behind a desk that could have doubled as a landing strip was Victoria Hale, 70 years old if she was a day, wearing a gray suit that probably cost 5 figures. "Lily, thank you for coming." She stood, came around the desk, shook Lily's hand with a grip that was surprisingly firm. "Please, sit." Lily sat in a leather chair that was more comfortable than her bed. Victoria settled into the chair beside her rather than going back behind the desk, which felt deliberate, less intimidating, more conversation than interrogation. I imagine you're wondering why I asked you here, Victoria said. The thought crossed my mind. A small smile. I'll be direct. I know you were fired from Aurelius on Friday. I know it was because Ethan Calloway called your manager and lied about your conduct. The words hit like a physical blow. Lily's throat closed. How? I have resources. Victoria said it simply, like having the ability to dig into someone's employment records was perfectly normal. And I was suspicious after our dinner Thursday night. The way he treated you, the questions he asked. So I made some calls, found out what happened. Why do you care? It came out harsher than Lily intended, but Victoria didn't flinch. Because I was about to go into business with a man who turned out to be petty, vindictive, and cruel. You saved me from making a very expensive mistake. She paused. And because what he did to you was wrong, Lily felt something crack in her chest. She'd been holding it together for 5 days, telling herself it didn't matter, that she'd find another job, that she'd survive like she always survived. But hearing someone else say it was wrong, hearing someone with power and money actually acknowledge the injustice, made it real in a way that threatened to break her. I don't know what you want me to say. Nothing. I'm not here for absolution or gratitude. Victoria leaned back. I'm here because I did some additional research after I learned what Calloway had done. Looked into your background. Princeton doctoral program, full ride. Published 3 papers as a graduate student. Your advisor called you one of the most talented linguists he'd seen in 20 years. Lily's face went hot. That was a long time ago. 4 years. That's not long at all. Victoria pulled a folder from the side table, opened it. Your dissertation was on the preservation of endangered languages through digital archival methods. Specifically, you were looking at oral histories in minority language communities. How did you? I have very good researchers. She closed the folder. Tell me why you left Princeton. You already know why. I know the facts. I want to hear it from you. Lily looked out the window at Central Park stretching out below them. Thought about saying something sanitized, professional. Decided she was too tired to lie. My father had a stroke. Massive. Left side paralyzed, speech impaired, needed round-the-clock care. I was 6 months into my PhD. I tried to keep going, thought I could manage the program and take care of him at the same time. But Princeton isn't exactly commuter-friendly, and he was in a hospital in Queens, and I was drowning. She stopped, swallowed hard. My advisor told me to take a leave of absence. Said I could come back when things stabilized. But things don't stabilize. They just get worse in slow motion. The medical bills piled up. Insurance denied half the claims. I maxed out credit cards paying for his nursing home because the alternative was some state facility where they warehouse people to die. And somewhere in there I realized I wasn't going back to Princeton. I was just lying to myself. So you started waitressing. I started surviving. There's a difference. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Then, what if I told you that you could go back? Back where? To your life. Your career. The work you actually trained for. She opened the folder again, pulled out a single sheet of paper. I run a company that specializes in international business development. We're expanding into northern Spain, Basque Country actually. We need someone who understands the language, the culture, the nuances of communication in a region that values its linguistic heritage. Lily stared at her. You want to hire me? I want to offer you a position as a cultural and language strategist. You'd be based primarily in San Sebastian, though there'd be travel. The salary is $200,000 annually, plus housing allowance and full benefits. Your father's medical care would be covered under our family health care plan. The numbers didn't compute. Lily heard them, understood the words individually, but couldn't make them mean anything. I don't have experience in corporate. You have exactly the experience I need. You're fluent in Basque, Spanish, and English at minimum. You understand linguistic nuance. You can navigate cultural differences. And based on Thursday night, you can handle yourself under pressure. Victoria slid the paper across. This is a contract. Take it home, read it, think about it. I need an answer by Friday. Lily picked up the paper with shaking hands. The letterhead alone looked more official than anything she'd ever touched. Her eyes skipped over the legal language to the compensation section. $200,000, full medical coverage, relocation assistance. It was impossible. Things like this didn't happen to people like her. There had to be a catch.
Why? She asked. Why me? You could hire someone with actual corporate experience, someone who's been working in this field for years. I could, Victoria agreed, but I don't want someone who's been working in this field for years. I want someone brilliant who's been overlooked, someone who understands what it's like to fight for things that matter, someone who chose duty over ambition and is still standing. She stood, straightened her jacket. Read the contract, think about it. Call my office by Friday with your answer. She walked to the door, paused. For what it's worth, Lily, I think you underestimate yourself, but that's something we can work on. She left Lily sitting there holding a contract that could change everything, too stunned to move. The receptionist eventually came in and gently informed her that she had a meeting scheduled. Lily stumbled out of the office, into the elevator, through the lobby, and onto the street where the afternoon sun felt surreal after the air-conditioned perfection of Victoria Hale's world. She walked for blocks without direction, the contract folded in her purse, her mind spinning. This couldn't be real, couldn't be happening. People didn't just offer you your life back because you'd been kind once, or smart once, or any of the things Victoria had implied. Her phone rang. Her father's nursing home. Lily's heart stopped. Hello? Ms. Navarro, this is Sandra from Green Lawn Care Facility. Your father's fine, she added quickly, hearing Lily's sharp intake of breath. But we need to discuss his account. You're currently 2 months behind on payments. The world snapped back into focus. Reality, sharp-edged and unforgiving. I know. I'm sorry. I had some employment changes, but I'm working on it. We need payment by the end of the week, or we'll have to discuss alternative arrangements. Alternative arrangements meant the state facility, the warehouse, the place where her father would spend his remaining years staring at beige walls, getting minimal care from overworked staff, dying by inches. I'll have it, Lily said. By Friday. I promise. She hung up and stood on the corner of Madison Avenue, watching people stream past in their expensive clothes, heading to their important jobs, living lives that made sense. And she thought about the contract in her purse, the impossible offer, the escape route that had appeared exactly when she needed it most. Too convenient, too perfect, but also too necessary to refuse. She went home, read the contract 3 times, Googled Victoria Hale and found exactly what she'd expected. Articles about her business empire, profiles in Forbes and Fortune, a Wikipedia page that detailed 4 decades of successful ventures. Legitimate, respected, real. At 9 that night, Lily called the number on the contract. Catherine Shaw answered on the second ring. Miss Navarro, have you made a decision? I need to ask something first. Of course. Why did Victoria really do this? And don't tell me it's because I'm qualified. There's more to it. A pause. Then Catherine said, Ms. Hale canceled a merger with Ethan Callaway yesterday. $8 billion walked away because she discovered what he'd done to you. She decided that anyone willing to destroy a powerless person over wounded pride wasn't someone she could trust with her company. Lily sat down hard on her bed. She canceled. Because of me? Because of him. You just happened to be how she learned his true character. Another pause. Ms. Hale doesn't do charity, Ms. Navarro. She does business, and she believes you're good business. The rest is just timing. I accept, Lily said before she could second-guess herself. The position. I accept. Excellent. I'll send over onboarding paperwork tomorrow. When can you start? I need 2 weeks. To settle things here, make arrangements for my father. 2 weeks is fine. We'll arrange your relocation to San Sebastian. Welcome to the team, Ms. Navarro. Lily hung up and burst into tears, sobbed into her hands like something had broken open inside her, all the fear and exhaustion and desperation of the last 4 years pouring out. She cried until she couldn't breathe, until her head ached, until there was nothing left. Then she washed her face and called her father's facility. This is Lily Navarro. I'll have the full payment to you by tomorrow afternoon, all of it, plus next month's in advance. She could hear the surprise in Sandra's voice. That's wonderful, Miss Navarro. We'll look forward to it. For the first time in years, Lily went to bed without the weight of impossible debt crushing her chest. She slept for 10 hours straight and woke up to sunlight streaming through her window, feeling like maybe, possibly, life could be different than she'd thought. The emergency board meeting convened at 8 in the morning on Tuesday,
which told Ethan everything he needed to know about how bad things had gotten. Board meetings happened quarterly, scheduled months in advance with catered lunches and PowerPoint presentations. Emergency meetings happened when the ship was sinking and everyone needed to decide whether to bail water or abandon vessel. Ethan walked into the conference room to find 12 faces staring at him with expressions ranging from concern to barely concealed hostility. Richard Chen, the board chair and early investor who'd believed in Callaway Technologies when it was just an idea scribbled on a coffee-stained napkin, sat at the head of the table looking older than his 58 years. "Ethan, sit down." He sat. Marcus slid into the chair beside him, laptop already open, ready to pull up whatever data might defend them. Except there was no data that could fix this. The stock had closed yesterday, down 18%. 18% of $8 billion, gone in a single day, because Victoria Hale had walked away and taken the market's confidence with her. "Let's skip the pleasantries," Richard said. "What the hell happened with the Hale merger?" "She got cold feet," Ethan said, trying to sound confident. "It happens. Investors back out all the time. Investors back out when the numbers don't work, when there's regulatory issues, when market conditions change." Richard leaned forward. "They don't back out 24 hours after a dinner meeting where everything was reportedly going well. So I'll ask again, what happened?" Ethan felt the room watching him, judging him, waiting for him to stumble. There was a disagreement about company culture. She had concerns about management style. Management style. Richard said it like he was tasting something rotten. "That's corporate speak for 'I fucked up.' What did you actually do?" "Nothing that warrants this level of..." "Bloomberg is running a story this morning." This came from Margaret Reeves, who'd made her fortune in private equity and had the warmth of a tax audit. She pulled out her phone, read from the screen. Sources close to the deal suggest that Victoria Hale withdrew due to serious concerns about CEO Ethan Callaway's judgment and temperament. One source described Callaway as vindictive and unstable. The words hung in the air like smoke. "That's slander," Marcus said. "We should sue." "Sue Bloomberg?" Richard laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Sure, great plan. Really helps with the temperament concerns." "I want to know where they got that quote," Ethan said. His voice came out tight, strained. "Victoria signed an NDA. She can't..." "The quote is from sources close to the deal, not from Victoria herself." Margaret set down her phone. "Which means it could be anyone in her organization. Anyone at the restaurant that night. Hell, it could be someone at this table for all we know." Everyone looked at everyone else. The paranoia in the room was thick enough to choke on. "This is fixable," Ethan said. "We put out a statement. We move forward with other acquisition targets. We show the market that we're stable, that one failed merger doesn't define us. Except it's not just one failed merger." Richard pulled up something on the tablet in front of him. "In the last 18 hours, I've gotten calls from 3 major investors expressing concerns. 2 board members from companies we were in preliminary talks with have postponed meetings indefinitely. Our stock is in freefall, and the financial press is writing your obituary. So we fight back." "With what? The truth?" Richard's voice hardened. "Tell me the truth, Ethan. What really happened at that dinner?" And there it was. The moment where Ethan could either lie, maintain the fiction that he'd done nothing wrong, that Victoria was irrational, that this was all a misunderstanding, or tell them about the waitress and the Basque and the phone call that had gotten her fired because his ego couldn't handle being embarrassed. He chose option 3, deflection. Personal differences, that's all. Victoria and I had different visions for the company's future, and it became clear we weren't compatible partners. "You're lying." Everyone turned to look at David Kim, the newest board member and the only one under 40. He was staring at Ethan with an expression of pure disgust. "Excuse me?" Ethan said. "I said you're lying. I know what happened. My cousin works at Aurelius." David pulled out his own phone. "Want me to read you the text she sent me yesterday about how you got a waitress fired for no reason except that she spoke better Basque than you did?" The conference room went silent. Ethan felt his face go hot. That's a gross mischaracterization." "Is it?" David stood up. "Did you or did you not call the restaurant and complain about her? Did you or did you not get her fired? She was inappropriate. She violated..." "She answered your question in the language you addressed her in. That's her job.
David's voice rose. You humiliated yourself by picking a fight you couldn't win, and then you destroyed her livelihood out of spite. And now it's destroying this company. Sit down, Richard said quietly.
No. David grabbed his briefcase. I'm not sitting in a room with someone who abuses his power like that. I'm out. Consider this my resignation from the board, effective immediately. He left. The door clicked shut behind him with a finality that felt like a gunshot. Richard turned back to Ethan. His expression had gone from concern to something much colder. Is what he said true? Ethan wanted to lie. Wanted to spin it, reframe it, make it sound like anything other than what it was. But the room had already turned against him. He could see it in their faces. There was an incident at the restaurant, he said carefully. I may have overreacted. You may have overreacted. Richard closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them, Ethan saw something he'd never seen from the man who'd championed him for years. Disappointment. Do you have any idea what you've done? Any concept of the damage? It was a waitress. One person. It shouldn't have mattered, Richard finished. But it did. Because Victoria Hale doesn't do business with people she doesn't trust. And you showed her exactly who you are. Someone petty. Someone cruel. Someone who can't be trusted with power. That's not fair. Fair? Margaret laughed. You want to talk about fair? Is it fair that hundreds of employees are watching their stock options evaporate because you couldn't control your ego? Is it fair that this company's valuation has dropped $2 billion in a day because you decided to punish someone for being smarter than you? Ethan gripped the armrests of his chair. I built this company. I took it from nothing to $8 billion. One mistake doesn't erase that. It does when that mistake reveals your character. Richard stood. I'm calling a vote. All in favor of removing Ethan Callaway as CEO and appointing an interim replacement while we search for permanent leadership? 8 hands went up. Out of 11 remaining board members, 8 voted to remove him. Just like that. $8 billion, 6 years of work. A company he'd built with his own hands. Gone because he'd been cruel to someone who didn't matter. Someone powerless. Someone who turned out to matter very much to the one person whose opinion could destroy him. You can't do this, Ethan said. His voice sounded distant, like someone else was speaking. I'm the founder. This is my company. You own 38% of the stock, Richard said, which means you don't have controlling interest. The board has the authority to remove you as CEO, and that's what we're doing. You'll maintain your ownership stake, but operational control transfers to Marcus effective immediately. Ethan looked at Marcus, who wouldn't meet his eyes. You knew, Ethan said. I tried to tell you not to call the restaurant, Marcus said quietly. You didn't listen. So you're just going to take my job? Stab me in the back after everything? I'm trying to save the company. Marcus finally looked at him. Someone has to, and right now, that someone can't be you. Ethan stood so fast his chair rolled backward and hit the wall. This is insane. You're all acting like I committed a crime. I made a phone call. That's it. One phone call. That ruined someone's life, Margaret said. That's what you're not getting, Ethan. You didn't just make a phone call. You wielded your power like a weapon against someone who had no defense. And when someone like Victoria Hale saw that, she understood something important, that you're not fit to lead. Get out, Richard said. Security will escort you to collect your personal belongings. Your company email will be deactivated within the hour. We'll be in touch through legal counsel regarding the transition. You can't. We can. And we did. Now leave before we have you removed. Ethan left. Walked out of the conference room past assistants who suddenly found their desks fascinating, past executives who stepped into doorways to avoid acknowledging him, past the receptionist who'd greeted him every morning for 6 years and now looked at him like he was a stranger. Security met him at his office. 2 guards he recognized, had hired, technically, since they worked for his company, who now stood there with polite, impassive expressions while he packed his things into a cardboard box. Awards. Photos of Emma. The first dollar of revenue Callaway Technologies had earned, framed on his wall like it meant something. It took 15 minutes to reduce his entire professional life to one box. They walked him to the elevator. Rode down 43 floors in silence. Escorted him through the lobby where employees whispered and stared and probably recorded the whole thing on their phones for social media. out onto the street where the October morning felt too bright, too normal for the end of everything. His driver pulled up. At least they hadn't fired his driver yet. "Where to, Mr. Calloway?" "Home. Where else was there?" The penthouse felt cavernous and empty when he walked in at 10 in the morning on a Tuesday. Emma was at school. The nanny was probably running errands. Just Ethan and 3 floors of luxury that suddenly felt like a museum dedicated to someone else's life. He poured bourbon, even though it was barely past breakfast. Sat in his office overlooking the Hudson and tried to process what had just happened. He'd been fired from his own company. The company he'd built from nothing, that bore his name, that was supposed to be his legacy, gone because of a waitress, because of Lily Navarro. His phone buzzed, a text from his lawyer. "We need to talk. Call me ASAP." He didn't call. Instead, he opened his laptop and did what he'd been avoiding, Googled himself. The results were devastating. Bloomberg. Callaway Technologies in crisis as CEO ousted following failed merger. TechCrunch, inside the collapse of Ethan Callaway's empire. The Wall Street Journal. Sources say Callaway's temperament sank billion-dollar deal. And worst of all, a piece in New York Magazine titled The Billionaire and the Waitress, How Ego Destroyed an Empire. Someone had leaked the whole story. Not the sanitized version, not the corporate spin, but the actual truth. How he'd tried to humiliate Lily and Basque, how she'd responded perfectly, how he'd gotten her fired afterward out of spite. They even had her name, her background, the fact that she'd left Princeton to care for her sick father. The comment sections were brutal. Imagine being so insecure you destroy someone's livelihood because they embarrassed you. This is what happens when you give mediocre men billions of dollars. I hope that waitress sues him into oblivion. Ethan closed the laptop, poured more bourbon, sat there as the morning turned into afternoon, watching his phone light up with calls from reporters, former colleagues, people who'd been his friends when he was on top and were now calling to gawk at the wreckage. He ignored all of them. At 3:30, his lawyer called for the 5th time. Ethan finally answered. "What? Have you seen the news?" Jonathan Marsh sounded stressed, which was notable because Jonathan never sounded stressed. Stressed was for clients. Lawyers were supposed to be calm. "I've seen it. The board is drafting a press release announcing your removal. They want you to sign off on it." "Why would I do that?" "Because if you don't, they'll release it anyway, and your lack of cooperation becomes part of the story. At least this way you get to control some of the narrative." "There is no narrative to control. I'm the villain. That's the story." "Then let's mitigate the damage." Papers rustled on Jonathan's end. "I'm also fielding calls from 3 different news outlets wanting to interview you. I've been declining, but if you want to tell your side, there is no my side, not one that people will believe." Ethan laughed, bitter. "What am I supposed to say, that I was having a bad day? That I didn't mean for things to go this far? That I'm sorry?" "Are you sorry?" The question hung there. Ethan thought about Lily Navarro, thought about her quiet voice, her downcast eyes, the way she'd moved through that restaurant like she was trying to disappear. Thought about her standing in some manager's office being told she was fired, probably terrified about how she'd survive, how she'd pay for her father's care. He thought about his daughter, 6 years old, learning what her father was from news articles and whispers at her fancy private school. "Yeah," he said finally. "I'm sorry, for whatever that's worth." "It's worth something," Jonathan said. "Not legally, maybe, but personally." They hung up after Jonathan promised to send over the press release for review. Ethan read it when it came through. A masterpiece of corporate doublespeak that basically said he was stepping down to pursue other opportunities while wishing the company well. He signed it electronically and sent it back without comment. At 6, Emma came home. He heard her voice in the foyer, bright and cheerful, talking to the nanny about something that happened at school. He should have gone out to greet her, should have acted normal, like nothing had changed. Instead, he stayed in his office and let the nanny handle dinner and bath time and all the other routines that he'd hired people to manage because he was too busy building an empire that no longer wanted him. Someone knocked on his office door around 8. The nanny probably coming to tell him Emma wanted to say goodnight. "Come in." But it wasn't the nanny. It was Emma herself, wearing pajamas with dinosaurs on them, clutching her stuffed elephant. "Hi, baby." "You're home early," she said, patting across the carpet to climb into the chair beside his. "You're never home early." "Yeah, well, slow day at work." She studied him with those two knowing eyes. Are you sad?
What makes you say that?
You smell like the drink you have when you're sad. Bourbon. She meant bourbon. His 6-year-old daughter had already learned to associate the smell of alcohol with her father's unhappiness. That felt like a failure more profound than anything the board had done to him today. Maybe a little sad, he admitted. Why? How did you explain to a 6-year-old that you'd lost everything because you were cruel to someone who didn't deserve it? That you'd let your worst impulses destroy the life you'd built? That you were fundamentally not a good person? Work stuff, he said. Nothing for you to worry about. Is it because people are mad at you? He looked at her sharply. What? Claire's mom was talking to another mom at pickup. They didn't know I could hear. They said you were mean to someone and now everyone's mad. The shame hit like a physical thing, radiating through his chest. His daughter had heard other parents gossiping about him at her school, in front of her. Yeah, he said quietly. I was mean to someone, and I shouldn't have been. Did you say sorry? Not to the person I hurt. She doesn't want to hear from me. Emma thought about this, swinging her feet from the chair. When I'm mean to someone, you tell me I have to apologize, even if it's hard, even if I don't want to. This is different, Em. How? Because I'm an adult, because there are consequences, because some things you can't fix by saying sorry. But he couldn't say any of that to his daughter, who was looking at him like he was supposed to have answers, like he was supposed to be someone worth looking up to. You're right, he said instead. It's not different. I should apologize. Then you should do it. She slid down from the chair. I'm going to go to bed now. Love you. Love you too, baby. She left, and Ethan sat there in his office thinking about apologies. What they meant. Whether they mattered when the damage was already done. His phone lit up with a notification. Another news article. Another dissection of his failure. He turned the phone face down and stared at the ceiling until the nanny knocked to tell him Emma was asleep. The next morning, he woke up to discover that his removal from Callaway Technologies was the top story in the business section of the New York Times. The article was thorough, well-researched, and absolutely damning. It quoted former employees anonymously describing his management style as tyrannical. It referenced the incident with Lily, though they kept her last name out of it, just called her a restaurant employee, and positioned it as the final straw in a pattern of abusive behavior. The article also mentioned that Victoria Hale had declined to comment on the record, but that sources close to Hale confirmed she'd canceled the merger due to concerns about Callaway's character. By noon, he had 47 missed calls. By 3, the story had been picked up by every major news outlet. By evening, he was trending on social media, and not in a good way. His phone buzzed, a number he didn't recognize. What? Mr. Callaway, this is Rebecca Chen from the Times. I'm doing a follow-up piece on your removal from Callaway Technologies. Would you be willing to comment? No. The piece is running with or without your input. I thought you might want to... Boop! He hung up. The calls kept coming. Reporters, old colleagues, investors who wanted to know if the rumors were true. He ignored all of them and spent the day drinking bourbon in his office while his daughter was at school and the world discussed what a terrible person he was. At some point, his lawyer called. There's a problem. Just one? Ethan laughed. Lucky me. The waitress, Lily Navarro. Apparently she's been hired by Victoria Hale's company. As of this week, she's working for one of the most powerful business development firms in Europe. The bourbon turned sour in Ethan's stomach. What? It gets worse. There are rumors that Victoria specifically hired her as a response to what you did. As a statement. Ethan closed his eyes. Of course. Of course Victoria had done that. It was the perfect move. Rescue the woman he'd tried to destroy, prove that talent and character mattered more than spite, and twist the knife in Ethan's reputation one more time. Anything else? The board is considering whether to pursue legal action to recoup losses related to the failed merger. They're arguing that your conduct directly caused the deal to collapse. They can't prove that. They don't have to prove it in court. They just have to threaten it loudly enough that your reputation takes another hit. Jonathan paused. Ethan, you need to consider bankruptcy protection. Your legal exposure here is significant. I'm worth $8 billion. You own stock in a company that's lost 24% of its value in 3 days. You've got a board that's hostile, investors who are fleeing, and a public image that's toxic. Even if the company rebounds, your shares are going to be devalued for years. Add in potential legal fees, and you're looking at losing most of your liquid assets. The words sounded like they were coming from very far away. How did this happen? Ethan asked. You made a mistake, a bad one, and it spiraled. One phone call, that's all it was. One phone call that revealed who you really are, Jonathan said quietly. That's what people are responding to, not the action itself, but what it says about your character. They hung up. Ethan sat there in his office as the sun set over the Hudson, watching the city light up below him, and wondered when exactly he'd become the person everyone now knew him to be. The villain, the cautionary tale, the billionaire who'd lost everything because he couldn't handle being embarrassed by a waitress. His phone buzzed one more time, an email from an address he didn't recognize. The subject line read, "You were right." He opened it. The message was short. "You told me that relaxation is how empires collapse. Turns out cruelty works faster. Enjoy what's left of yours." It was unsigned, but Ethan knew who'd sent it. Victoria Hale. He deleted the email and poured another drink and sat in the dark while his empire burned around him, finally understanding that some mistakes can't be fixed and some damage can't be undone, and some people, like the quiet waitress he'd tried to destroy, turn out to be stronger than the men who underestimated them. San Sebastian smelled like the ocean and rain, and something Lily couldn't quite name but that felt like possibility. She'd arrived 3 weeks ago with 2 suitcases and a father who'd cried when she'd explained that she was moving to Spain, but that he'd be coming with her as soon as the medical transport could be arranged. "You don't have to do this for me," Miguel had said from his wheelchair in the nursing home, his good hand gripping hers too tight. "I'm not doing it for you, I'm doing it for me." And that was true, mostly. The job was real, the opportunity was real. But the fact that Victoria's company had arranged for her father to be transferred to a private care facility in San Sebastian, with a staff that spoke both Spanish and English, with ocean views and physical therapists who specialized in stroke recovery. That was the kind of thing that made Lily wake up at 3 a.m, convinced she was dreaming. She'd spent the first week in a furnished apartment near La Concha Beach, jet-lagged and disoriented, trying to remember how to be someone other than a waitress drowning in debt. The apartment had actual rooms, plural, a kitchen with a full-sized refrigerator, windows that opened onto a street where people spoke Basque and Spanish interchangeably, where the language she'd studied in dusty library books was alive and functional and everywhere. The second week, she'd started at Victoria's company headquarters, a modern building tucked into the hills overlooking the bay. Her official title was Cultural Integration Specialist, which sounded impressive and vague enough that Lily had no idea what she was supposed to do until her first meeting with the project lead. His name was Andoni Aguirre, 50-something, born and raised in Donostia, the Basque name for San Sebastian, and deeply skeptical of the American woman who'd been hired to help his team navigate cultural nuances. "So," he'd said in their first meeting, speaking English with a thick accent, "Victoria says you speak Basque." "I do. Everyone says they speak Basque. Then they know 10 words and think it makes them special." He switched languages without warning, rapid-fire Basque that Lily's brain had to scramble to catch. "Tell me about your academic background. Why should I trust that you understand anything about our culture?" And Lily, who'd spent 4 years making herself small and apologetic and invisible, felt something shift. She answered him in Basque, explained her graduate work, her dissertation research, her focus on language preservation in minority communities, talked about the tension between cultural identity and economic development, about how the Basque country had managed to maintain linguistic heritage despite centuries of suppression. Andoni had listened with his arms crossed, his expression unchanging. When she finished, he'd nodded once. "Okay, maybe you're not completely useless." It was the closest thing to approval she'd gotten, and it felt like victory. The work itself was harder than anything she'd done at Princeton. Victoria's company was developing a series of luxury hotels and conference centers throughout Basque Country, and Lily's job was to ensure that the projects respected local culture while remaining profitable. That meant navigating town councils who viewed any outside development with suspicion. It meant understanding the difference between tourist-friendly Basque aesthetics and actual cultural authenticity. It meant sitting in meetings where men twice her age questioned her credentials and she had to prove herself over and over. But it also meant using her brain again. meant solving problems that mattered, meant going home exhausted in a way that felt purposeful rather than defeating. By week 3, she'd presented her first major report to the development team, a 40-page analysis of how to incorporate traditional Basque architectural elements into modern hotel design without turning it into a theme park. Andoni had read it, made notes in the margins, and said, "Not bad, do it again. Better this time." She'd done it again. Made it better. And the next time Andoni had just grunted and moved on to the next project, which Lily had learned to interpret as high praise. On a Friday afternoon at the end of her 3rd week, Victoria called. "How are you settling in?" she asked without preamble. Lily looked around her office, a real office with her name on a placard, outside the door, and tried to find words. "It's good, challenging. Andoni hates me, but I think he hates everyone, so I'm trying not to take it personally." Victoria laughed. "Andoni doesn't hate you. If he hated you, he wouldn't bother making you redo your work. He'd just ignore you until you quit." "That's comforting. How's your father?" Miguel had arrived 5 days ago, transported by medical plane to a facility so nice that Lily had walked through it the first time convinced there'd been a mistake. Private room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay, staff who checked on him every 2 hours, a physical therapy gym that looked like something from a sports medicine center. "He's doing well, better than I expected. The therapists here are incredible." "Good, that's good." A pause. "I'm calling because I want you to come to London next week. There's a conference on international development that I think you should attend. Network a bit, get your face known in the industry." Lily's stomach clenched. "I don't know if I'm ready for—" "You're ready. I wouldn't send you if you weren't." Victoria's tone left no room for argument. "My assistant will send you the details. Plan to stay for 4 days? The company will cover everything." She hung up before Lily could protest further. The conference was exactly as intimidating as Lily had feared. Held at a hotel in Mayfair that probably cost more per night than her old apartment cost per month, filled with people in expensive suits discussing market penetration and cultural capital like they were trading baseball cards. Lily spent the first day feeling like an imposter. She sat in panels on sustainable development and heritage preservation, took notes she'd probably never look at again, and avoided eye contact during networking sessions because the thought of walking up to strangers and introducing herself made her want to vomit. On the second day, Victoria found her hiding in a corner during a cocktail reception. "You're doing that thing where you try to be invisible," Victoria said, appearing at her elbow with a glass of wine. "I'm observing." "You're hiding." She handed Lily the wine glass. "Drink this. Then come with me. There's someone I want you to meet." She led Lily across the room to a group of people clustered near the windows. One of them was a woman in her 40s with sharp cheekbones and sharper eyes, dressed in a suit that looked like it cost more than Lily's entire wardrobe. "Lily, this is Dr. Sarah Chen. She runs the Cultural Heritage Division at the Global Development Initiative. Sarah, this is Lily Navarro, the specialist I told you about." Sarah extended her hand. Lily shook it, trying not to show how nervous she was. "Victoria says you did your graduate work at Princeton," Sarah said. "Historical linguistics?" "Yes, I didn't finish my doctorate, but—" "She left to care for her father," Victoria interjected smoothly. "Family emergency." But her academic work was exceptional. Sarah studied Lily with the kind of attention that felt like being X-rayed. "What was your dissertation focus?" And just like that, Lily was talking about her research, about oral histories in endangered language communities, about the tension between preservation and evolution, about how languages died not with a bang, but with a slow fade as younger generations chose dominant languages for economic survival. Sarah listened, asked questions that suggested she actually knew what she was talking about, and by the end of the conversation had handed Lily her card. "We're always looking for consultants on heritage projects. If you're interested in freelance work beyond your current position, reach out." After she left, Victoria smiled. "See? Not so terrible." "You set that up." "Of course I did. You have skills people need, but you won't use them if you keep trying to disappear." She sipped her wine. "I hired you because you're brilliant, Lily, not because I felt sorry for you. So stop acting like you don't belong here." Over the next 2 days, Lily forced herself to network, had conversations that didn't end in disaster, exchanged business cards with people who seemed genuinely interested in her work. It felt strange and uncomfortable and occasionally exhilarating. On the final evening, there was a gala dinner. Lily almost skipped it. Her feet hurt from 3 days of standing in heels, and the thought of making more small talk sounded exhausting. But Victoria had already bought her ticket. She sat at a table with 7 strangers, made polite conversation through the appetizer course, and was halfway through her salmon when the woman beside her said, "Oh my God, is that Ethan Calloway?" Lily's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. "Where?" "By the bar. Dark suit. Looks like he hasn't slept in a week." The woman, "Emma, maybe?" Lily had already forgotten her name, pulled out her phone. "I heard he completely melted down after that merger fell through. Lost his company, lost everything." Lily turned slowly, and there he was. Ethan Calloway, the man who'd tried to destroy her life, standing at the bar looking diminished in a way she couldn't quite articulate. He'd lost weight. His suit still fit, but it hung differently, like he'd shrunk inside it, and his face had a hollowness that hadn't been there 3 weeks ago when she'd seen him in that restaurant. "What's he doing here?" someone else at the table asked. "Trying to rebuild his reputation, probably. Good luck with that." They laughed. Lily didn't. She just watched as Ethan ordered a drink, his shoulders hunched, his eyes scanning the room like he was looking for someone and dreading finding them. Their eyes met across the ballroom. Lily saw the recognition hit him, saw his face go pale, then flush, saw him grip his drink like it was the only thing keeping him upright. She should have looked away, should have turned back to her table, finished her dinner, pretended he didn't exist. Instead, she stood up. "Excuse me," she said to no one in particular and walked toward the bar. Ethan watched her approach with an expression that looked like a man watching his own execution. By the time she reached him, he'd set down his drink and shoved his hands in his pockets like he didn't trust them not to shake. "Lily." Her name came out rough. "Ethan." They stood there in the noise of the gala, an island of terrible silence, until Ethan said, "I didn't know you'd be here. Victoria invited me. I work for her now." "I heard." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Congratulations. I mean that. You deserve it." "Do I?" The question came out sharper than intended. "Yes. You were brilliant. You are brilliant. I was just too insecure to handle it." The honesty of it surprised her. This wasn't the arrogant billionaire from the restaurant. This was someone who'd been broken and was still figuring out how the pieces fit together. "Why are you here?" she asked. "Honestly, I don't know. My lawyer thought it would be good for my image to show my face at industry events. Prove I'm not hiding." He picked up his drink again, set it down without tasting it. "Turns out people don't want to talk to you when you're famous for being terrible." "Shocking." He flinched. "I deserve that." "You deserve a lot more than that." "I know." Ethan finally looked at her directly. "I know what I did to you. I know I ruined your life because I couldn't handle being embarrassed. And I know that nothing I say will fix it, but I'm sorry, for whatever that's worth." Lily felt something complex twist in her chest. Anger, yes, but also something else. Something that recognized the wreckage in front of her and couldn't quite summon the satisfaction she'd expected to feel. "It's worth something," she said quietly. "Not enough, but something. I tried to call you before you left for Spain, but I didn't have your number, and it felt insane to track you down through—" He stopped. "I wanted to apologize, wanted to try to make it right somehow, but there's no making this right, is there?" "No, there isn't." "How's your father?" The question surprised her. "He's good. Better. The facility Victoria's company arranged is incredible." "Good. I'm glad." They fell silent again. Around them, the gala continued. People laughed and clinked glasses and made deals that would shape markets and move money. The world that Ethan had fallen out of and Lily had fallen into, both of them strangers in different ways. "I have a daughter," Ethan said suddenly. "Emma. She's 6. After everything happened, after I lost the company, she asked me why I didn't apologize to the person I hurt, and I told her it was complicated. But it's not, is it? It's actually very simple. I hurt you. I should apologize. So I'm doing it now, even though it's too late and doesn't change anything." Lily studied his face, saw genuine remorse there, underneath the exhaustion and shame. "Apology noted," she said. "Doesn't mean I forgive you." "I wouldn't forgive me either." "Good. Then we understand each other." She started to turn away, then stopped. "For what it's worth, I hope you figure out how to be better. For your daughter, if nothing else. She walked back to her table before he could respond. Sat down to cold salmon and curious looks from the other guests. What was that about? Emma, maybe not Emma, asked. Old business, Lily said. Nothing important, but her hands shook as she picked up her fork and she couldn't finish her dinner. The next morning, she flew back to San Sebastian and threw herself into work with an intensity that Andoni actually commented on. You're going to burn out, he said, reviewing her latest proposal for a cultural center in Bilbao. I'm fine. You're working 12-hour days, that's not fine. I have 4 years of not using my brain to make up for. He studied her for a long moment. Victoria told me what happened in New York with Calloway. Lily's jaw tightened. Did she? She wanted me to understand why you might be intense about proving yourself. He set down the proposal. You don't have to prove anything, you know. You're good at this. Better than most people I've worked with, so maybe relax a little before you combust. It was the kindest thing he'd ever said to her. Lily felt her throat get tight. I'll try. Good. Now go visit your father. Take the weekend off. The Basque country will still be here Monday. She did. Spent Saturday at the care facility, sitting with Miguel in the garden while he told her stories about her mother that she'd heard 100 times but never got tired of. His speech was improving. The therapist said he might regain some function in his left hand with enough work. Small victories, but they added up. Sunday, she walked along La Concha Beach watching surfers and families and old men playing cards at outdoor cafes. The October sun was weak but warm enough, and the city hummed with life in a way that made her chest ache with something she eventually recognized as happiness. Her phone buzzed. An email from Sarah Chen, the woman from the conference. She was organizing a panel on language preservation for a UNESCO summit in Paris and wanted to know if Lily would be interested in participating. Lily read the email 3 times, certain she was misunderstanding something. But no, it was real. Someone wanted her expertise. Someone thought she had something valuable to contribute to an international conversation about the work she'd loved and lost and somehow found again. She typed back, I'd be honored. Hit send before she could second-guess herself. That night, she called her father using the video chat the facility had set up. You look happy, Miguel said, his words clearer than they'd been in years. I am happy, I think. It feels weird. You deserve weird happiness, mija. Do I? You spent 4 years sacrificing everything for me, so yes, you deserve this. He paused. Your mother would be proud. I'm proud. Lily cried a little after they hung up. Good tears, though, the kind that felt like release rather than grief. Over the next month, she settled into a rhythm. Work during the week, visits with her father on weekends, occasional dinners with colleagues who were slowly becoming friends. Andoni invited her to his house for Sunday lunch with his family, where his wife made bacalao al pil pil, and his teenage daughter practiced English on Lily while his son argued about football. It felt like having a life, an actual life, not just survival. The UNESCO panel happened in November. Lily stood in front of 200 people and talked about digital preservation methods for endangered languages, about the ethics of documentation, about balancing academic goals with community needs. Her voice shook at first, but then she found her rhythm, and it felt like coming home to a part of herself she'd thought was dead. Afterward, 3 different organizations approached her about consulting work. A publisher asked if she'd be interested in turning her doctoral research into a book. A university in Barcelona wanted to know if she'd consider teaching a seminar. Lily said yes to the consulting work, maybe to the book, and no to teaching because she wasn't ready to leave San Sebastian. Wasn't ready to leave the life she was building piece by careful piece. In December, Victoria flew in for a site visit. They toured the hotel project in Guetaria, met with local officials, reviewed progress on the cultural center in Bilbao. That evening, they had dinner at a restaurant overlooking the harbor, just the 2 of them. You've done exceptional work, Victoria said over wine and grilled squid. Better than I expected, honestly. Thanks, I think. I'm serious. The team loves you. Even Andoni, and he hates everyone. She paused. I'm promoting you. Regional Director for Cultural Development. 20% raise, more autonomy, a seat at the leadership table. Lily set down her wine glass. I've only been here 4 months. And in 4 months, you've proven yourself invaluable. So take the promotion. You earned it. What if I'm not ready? Then you'll figure it out as you go. That's what we all do. Victoria smiled. Besides, I didn't rescue you from a billionaire's vindictiveness just to watch you play small. Dream bigger, Lily. That night, walking back to her apartment through streets decorated for Christmas, Lily thought about how her life had looked 6 months ago. The cramped studio in Astoria, the crushing debt, the exhaustion that went bone deep, the feeling that she'd never be anything more than a waitress drowning in circumstances beyond her control. And now here she was, in a beautiful city, doing work that mattered, with a father who was healing and a future that felt open rather than foreclosed. She thought about Ethan Calloway too, wondered where he was, what he was doing, whether he'd figured out how to be better, or if he was still drowning in the consequences of his own cruelty. Part of her hoped he was suffering, but a bigger part, the part that had grown stronger over these months, just hoped he'd learned something, that his daughter would grow up with a father who understood that power without kindness was just tyranny in expensive clothing. Her phone buzzed, a text from Andoni. Stop working. It's Sunday. Go drink wine or whatever Americans do. She laughed and texted back a thumbs up. Then she kept walking through the winter night, past cafes full of people speaking Basque and Spanish, past shops closing up for the evening, past a life she'd never imagined having and somehow had anyway. And for the first time in years, Lily Navarro felt like herself again. Not the version who'd left Princeton broken and desperate. Not the version who'd served tables while her dreams died quietly. But someone new, someone stronger. Someone who'd been tested and hadn't just survived, but somehow, impossibly, flourished. The woman she was always meant to become. Winter in New York hit different when you had nothing left to lose. Ethan discovered this in February, 6 months after his empire had collapsed. Standing in the frozen food aisle of a grocery store in Brooklyn, trying to remember if Emma liked the chicken nuggets shaped like dinosaurs or the ones shaped like stars. He used to have people who handled this. Now he had a shared custody arrangement, a 2-bedroom apartment in Park Slope that cost a third of what his penthouse had, and the humbling realization that he had no idea what his daughter actually ate for dinner. Dinosaurs. He was pretty sure it was dinosaurs. His phone rang while he was loading the cart. Marcus. You still screening my calls? Marcus asked when Ethan answered. Sometimes. Depends on the day. Ethan grabbed milk, bread, the ingredients for a life he was still learning how to live. What do you want? There's a board meeting next week. They want you to attend. Ethan's hand tightened on a box of pasta. Why? There's a vote on whether to buy back your remaining shares. They're offering 15% above current market value. Which sounded generous until you remembered that current market value was garbage. Callaway Technologies had stabilized under Marcus's leadership. The stock had recovered some of its losses, the company had pivoted into new markets, life went on. But Ethan's shares were still worth a fraction of what they'd been worth 8 months ago. They want to erase me completely, Ethan said. They want to move forward without the baggage of your name attached. Marcus paused. You should take the offer, Ethan. Use the money to start over. Do something else. Like what? I'm 32 years old and unemployable? You think anyone's going to hire the guy who became a cautionary tale about abusing power? So don't get hired. Start something new, something smaller, something that doesn't require you to be Ethan Calloway, billionaire genius. Ethan hung up without responding and finished his shopping in silence. Paid with a credit card that didn't have unlimited credit anymore, drove home to an apartment that didn't have a doorman, carried groceries up 3 flights of stairs because the elevator was broken again. Emma was waiting when he got home, sprawled on the couch, watching cartoons with the nanny, who still worked for him 3 days a week because he couldn't quite manage full-time parenting yet. Hey, baby, did you get the dinosaur nuggets? I did. Good. The star ones taste weird. Small victories. The nanny left. Ethan made dinner, nuggets, frozen vegetables that Emma picked at but didn't eat, apple slices that she actually consumed. They ate at the kitchen table instead of in separate rooms, and Ethan asked about school and listened to her talk about a boy named Jackson who'd eaten paste during art class. This was his life now. Smaller, simpler, and most days he had no idea if that was punishment or salvation. After Emma went to bed, Ethan sat at his laptop and did what he'd been doing every night for 3 months. He wrote. Not code, not business plans, just words. It had started as therapy. His court-mandated therapist had suggested journaling to process what she called his corrective emotional experience. But it had turned into something else, a blog that maybe 15 people read, where Ethan wrote about failure and accountability and what it felt like to lose everything because you'd been cruel to someone who didn't deserve it. He wrote about Emma, about learning to be a father instead of just a provider, about the difference between power and respect, about how easy it was to confuse the two when you'd never been challenged. Most of the comments called him a piece of shit. Some suggested he kill himself. A very few, said they appreciated his honesty. Tonight he wrote about grocery shopping, about standing in the frozen food aisle having a panic attack because he couldn't remember what kind of chicken nuggets his daughter liked, and what that said about how absent he'd been from her actual life. He published it at midnight and went to bed, where he didn't sleep so much as drift through anxiety until morning. The board meeting happened the following Tuesday. Ethan wore his second nicest suit, had to sell the Tom Ford collection to cover legal fees, and took the subway to Midtown because he'd sold his car too. Walked into the Callaway Technologies building for the first time in 6 months and felt like a ghost visiting his own haunted house. Security made him sign in. Security. At the company with his name on the door. The receptionist was new. Didn't recognize him. Just directed him to the 43rd floor with a professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. The conference room looked the same. Richard Chen sat at the head of the table, older somehow, grayer. Marcus was there, looking uncomfortable. The rest of the board watched Ethan walk in with expressions ranging from pity to contempt. "Ethan, thank you for coming." Richard gestured to an empty chair. "Please sit." He sat, felt the weight of their judgment pressing down like physical force. "I assume Marcus explained the offer," Richard said. "He did. We're prepared to buy out your remaining 38% stake at 15% above current market value. It's a fair offer, more than fair considering. Considering he'd destroyed billions in value through his own stupidity, considering his name was now toxic, considering they were doing him a favor by offering anything at all. What if I say no?" Ethan asked. "Then you remain a minority shareholder with no operational input and a name that will continue to drag down our valuation." Richard leaned forward. "This isn't personal, Ethan. It's business. Your association with this company hurts us. The market sees your name on quarterly reports and remembers the scandal. We need to move forward, and we can't do that with you attached. So this is my severance, my golden parachute. This is us giving you a chance to walk away with something. Take it." Ethan looked around the table, saw Marcus avoiding eye contact, saw Margaret Reeves examining her manicure, saw board members who'd once called him a genius now treating him like a problem to be solved. "I'll take it," he said quietly. "On one condition." Richard's eyebrows rose. "You're not exactly in a position to negotiate." "Not a negotiation. A request." Ethan pulled a folder from his bag, slid it across the table. "I want the company to establish a scholarship fund. Full ride for students pursuing graduate degrees in linguistics, with preference given to candidates who've had to leave programs due to family emergencies." Silence. "You want us to create a scholarship fund," Margaret said slowly. "Funded from my buyout, however much is left after taxes and my legal obligations, all of it." Ethan looked at Richard. "Call it the Navarro Linguistics Scholarship, in honor of someone who deserved better than what she got." More silence. Then Richard opened the folder, scanned the paperwork Ethan had prepared with his lawyer's help. "This is real," Richard said. "You actually want to do this?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because I destroyed someone's dreams and I can't give them back. But maybe I can keep someone else from losing theirs. Because my daughter asked me what I learned from losing everything. And I want to have an answer that isn't just, don't be an asshole. Because I need to believe that people can change, can be better, can take their worst mistakes, and build something worthwhile from the rubble." But Ethan just said, "Because it's the right thing to do." Richard studied him for a long moment. Then he looked at the board. "All in favor of accepting Mr. Callaway's terms?" Every hand went up. "Done." Richard signed the paperwork, slid it back. "The scholarship fund will be established within 60 days. You'll receive confirmation once the buyout is finalized." Ethan signed where his lawyer had flagged. Just like that, he was no longer part of Callaway Technologies. No longer a billionaire, just a guy with enough money to live comfortably if he was careful, a daughter who needed him, and a future that looked nothing like what he'd planned. He stood to leave. Marcus caught him at the elevator. "That was good. What you did in there?" "It was the bare minimum."
Still, Marcus shifted his weight. "For what it's worth, I think you're going to be okay. Eventually." "Yeah, eventually." The elevator arrived. Ethan stepped in, then held the door. "Take care of the company, Marcus. It deserves better than what I gave it." "I will." The doors closed.
Ethan went home and picked Emma up from school. They got ice cream even though it was freezing outside, and she told him about the Valentine's Day card she was making for her class. Her words tumbled over each other in that way kids talked when they were excited. And Ethan listened, actually listened, instead of thinking about emails or deals or all the things that used to feel more important than this. "Dad?" Emma asked, chocolate ice cream smeared on her chin. "Yeah? Are we poor now?" The question hit harder than it should have. "What makes you ask that?" "Because we moved, and you don't have a driver anymore. And Claire's mom said her dad said you lost all your money." Ethan wiped her chin with a napkin. "We're not poor, baby. We have enough. We just have different enough than before." "Is different bad?" "No. Different is just different." He paused. "Are you okay with different?" Emma thought about it, serious in that way 6-year-olds sometimes got. "I like the new apartment better. It's cozier, and you're home more." "You like me being home more?" "Yeah, before you were always working. Now you help with homework and make dinner and we watch movies." She swung her legs under the table. "So different is good, I think." Ethan felt his throat get tight. "Yeah, I think so too." That night, after Emma fell asleep, he got an email. Unknown sender, subject line, just a single word: scholarship. He opened it with his heart pounding. The message was short. "I heard what you did at the board meeting today. Thank you. It won't undo what happened, but it matters. It means something. I hope you're figuring out how to be better. For your daughter and for yourself." It was unsigned, but Ethan knew who'd sent it: Lily. He read the email 5 times, started to respond at least 3 times, finally just wrote, "Thank you for saying that. I'm trying. I hope you're doing well." He hit send before he could overthink it. Her response came 2 hours later. "I am. Better than I ever thought possible. Good luck, Ethan." That was it. No reconciliation, no forgiveness, just acknowledgement that they'd both survived their collision and moved on to separate lives. It was enough. Spring came slowly to New York, winter releasing its grip one grudging day at a time. Ethan started consulting for small tech startups, helping them avoid the mistakes he'd made, working for equity instead of cash because his reputation still preceded him. It was humbling work. These 25-year-old founders looked at him like a cautionary tale, not a mentor. But some of them listened, and their companies did better for it. He kept writing his blog. The audience grew slowly. A few hundred readers, then a few thousand. People who'd failed at something and were trying to figure out how to rebuild. People who'd hurt others and wanted to do better. People who recognized themselves in his mistakes and found something useful in his attempts at redemption. A publisher reached out in April, asked if he'd be interested in turning the blog into a book. Ethan said yes, then spent 3 months writing and revising and facing every terrible thing he'd done with a level of honesty that made him physically ill sometimes. The book came out in September, exactly 1 year after the dinner that had destroyed his life. It was called The Fall, and the dedication read, "For Emma, who taught me that being home matters more than being important, and for Lily, who deserved better." It sold modestly. Got some decent reviews. A few people called it a redemption arc. Others said it was performative nonsense from a rich guy trying to rehabilitate his image. Both were probably true. Emma turned 7. Ethan threw her a birthday party at a bowling alley. Nothing fancy, just her classmates and pizza and the kind of chaos that would have horrified the version of himself who'd existed a year ago. He took photos and posted them on the private Instagram account he'd started for family stuff, and he felt something that took him a minute to recognize. Contentment. Not happiness, exactly. Not the manic high of closing a deal or watching his net worth climb. Just the quiet satisfaction of being present for his daughter's life. Of being enough. In October, Lily came to New York. He found out because Victoria Hale mentioned it in an interview with Bloomberg. The reporter asked about the Callaway incident. Apparently it was still good copy a year later. And Victoria had said something about how Lily was giving a keynote at Columbia on language preservation, and how proud she was of her team. Ethan knew he shouldn't go, knew it was crossing a boundary, but he went anyway. The lecture hall was packed. Students, professors, people from the community who cared about linguistics for reasons Ethan didn't fully understand. He sat in the back, hoping to be invisible. Then Lily walked on stage, and Ethan forgot how to breathe. She looked different, confident. She wore a professional dress and actual makeup, and when she spoke, it was with the authority of someone who knew their subject cold. She talked about endangered languages in the digital age, about ethical documentation, about the communities she'd worked with in Basque Country who were reclaiming their linguistic heritage. She was brilliant. She'd always been brilliant, but now she was brilliant without apologizing for it. The talk lasted an hour. Afterward, there were questions. Lily answered each one with patience and precision, and Ethan realized he was watching someone who'd found their calling, not despite what had happened, but maybe because of it. When the event ended, he stayed in his seat while people filed out. Lily was surrounded by students and faculty, all wanting to talk to her. Ethan waited until the crowd thinned, then made his way to the front. She saw him coming. Her expression flickered, surprise, then something more complicated, but she didn't run. Ethan, I'm sorry, I know I shouldn't have come. I saw the announcement and I wanted to hear you speak. He shoved his hands in his pockets. You were incredible. That research you presented, the work you're doing, it's exactly what you should be doing. Thank you. She studied him. You look different. Lost some weight, gained some perspective. He tried to smile. How's your father? Good. Really good, actually. He's walking with a cane now. The therapists in San Sebastian worked miracles. I'm glad. They stood there in the emptying lecture hall, two people whose lives had collided catastrophically and who'd somehow survived to stand on opposite sides of the wreckage. I heard about the scholarship fund, Lily said. Thank you. It means a lot. It's the least I could do, literally. Ethan paused. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I learned something, that you changed me, that I'm trying to be better. I can see that. Lily's expression softened slightly. I read your book. You did? Victoria sent me a copy, said I should see what you'd written. She tilted her head. It was honest, uncomfortable, but honest. That's the goal. Are you happy? The question surprised him. With your life now, I mean. Are you okay? Ethan thought about it. About his apartment in Brooklyn, his consulting work, his evenings with Emma. About the blog and the book and the slow, painful process of becoming someone he could stand to be. I'm getting there, he said. It's not what I thought my life would look like. But maybe that's the point. Maybe I needed to lose everything to figure out what actually mattered. Lily nodded. I should go. I have dinner with some colleagues from the linguistics department. Of course. I won't keep you. He started to leave, then turned back. For what it's worth, I'm really proud of you. I know that's a weird thing to say given everything, but watching you up there tonight, seeing what you've become, you deserve this. You always deserved it. I know, Lily said simply. I finally figured that out. She left. Ethan stood in the empty lecture hall for a few more minutes, then walked out into the October night. The city looked the same as it always had, but he felt different moving through it. Lighter, maybe. Or just less burdened by the weight of who he used to think he needed to be. His phone buzzed, Emma's nanny, asking what time he'd be home. He texted back, 20 minutes, and he meant it. No detours, no distractions, just home to his daughter, to the life he was building one imperfect day at a time. 3 years later, Ethan stood in the audience at Princeton University watching Emma run around with other kids at a campus event. She was 9 now, tall for her age, with opinions about everything and a fierce independence that terrified and impressed him in equal measure. He'd brought her here for a specific reason. The Navarro Linguistics Scholarship was awarding its first recipients today. 5 students who'd left graduate programs due to financial or family hardship and who were now getting a second chance to finish what they'd started. Lily was there too. She'd flown in from Spain for the ceremony, looking polished and professional and completely at ease in a world that once would have intimidated her. They'd exchanged occasional emails over the years. Professional, cordial. Updates on the scholarship fund. Congratulations on her book about language preservation that had won multiple awards. News about his consulting firm that was actually doing okay. Not friends, exactly. But not enemies either. Just two people who'd collided brutally and who'd both managed to build something worthwhile from the damage. The ceremony was held in a lecture hall that Lily had probably studied in years ago, before everything had fallen apart. The dean spoke. Victoria gave a speech about the importance of supporting linguistic research. And then the scholarship recipients were introduced one by one. A woman who'd left her PhD to care for her mother with Alzheimer's. A man who'd dropped out when his family lost their home. Students who'd chosen duty over ambition and who are now getting a chance to choose both. They each told their stories, thanked the fund. Some of them cried. So did Ethan. Afterward, there was a reception. Ethan kept his distance, letting Lily talk to the students and faculty. But eventually she found him standing near the windows overlooking the campus. "Your daughter's beautiful," Lily said. "She looks like you." "Poor kid," Ethan smiled. "Thanks for coming today. I know it's probably weird." "It's not weird. It's important." She glanced at the scholarship recipients clustered around Victoria. "You gave them their lives back. That's not nothing." "I can't give you yours back." "No. But you gave me something better." At his confused look, she continued. "You taught me that I'm stronger than I thought, that I could survive the worst thing I imagined and come out better for it. So thank you, in a weird way." "That's a generous interpretation. Maybe. But it's also true." Lily paused. "I'm getting married next year, in San Sebastian, to someone I met through work who's kind and patient and doesn't need me to be small to feel big." "That's wonderful. Congratulations." "I wanted you to know, not because I need your approval or anything, just I wanted you to know that I'm happy, that the life you tried to destroy ended up becoming something better than I ever planned." "I'm glad," Ethan said, and meant it. "You deserve every bit of that happiness." They stood together watching the reception, two people who'd been villain and victim in a story that had somehow transformed into something more complicated. Something that suggested people could change, could grow, could take their worst moments and build something worthwhile from them. Emma ran up, demanding ice cream. Lily said goodbye and drifted back to her crowd. And Ethan took his daughter's hand and left the building, walking across a campus where someone else's second chance was just beginning. The subway ride home was noisy. Emma chattered about the college she wanted to go to, the languages she wanted to learn, Spanish and Basque, because that lady at the ceremony said they were cool, and whether they could get pizza for dinner. Ethan listened and responded and felt grateful for the chaos of it, for the mess of being human and failing and trying again, for the understanding that empires built on ego collapse, but lives built on showing up for the people who matter can survive almost anything. That night, after Emma fell asleep, he wrote one final blog post. It talked about beginnings disguised as endings, about how the worst thing that ever happened to him had led to the best version of himself, about a woman he'd tried to destroy who'd taught him more about strength than any business victory ever had. He ended with this: "Power without kindness is just tyranny. Ambition without empathy is just selfishness. I spent years confusing success with worth, and it cost me everything. But somewhere in losing it all, I found something more valuable. I found out who I wanted to be. Not who I thought I needed to be, just who I actually wanted to be. For my daughter, for myself, for the people whose lives intersect with mine, however briefly. If you're reading this because you failed at something, because you've hurt someone, because you're trying to figure out how to be better, I see you. Keep trying. It's the only thing that matters." He published it and closed his laptop. Checked on Emma one more time, still asleep, still clutching that battered elephant. Stood at his window, looking at the Brooklyn skyline, and thought about the penthouse in Tribeca he used to own, the empire he used to run, the man he used to be. He didn't miss any of it. What he had now was smaller, simpler, harder in some ways, easier in others, but it was real in a way his old life had never been, built on relationships instead of transactions, on presence instead of power, on the understanding that being enough was actually everything. And somewhere in Spain, Lily Navarro was probably asleep in her apartment overlooking the ocean, dreaming about wedding plans and research projects and a future that belonged entirely to her. A future no one could take away. A future she'd earned not by being powerful, but by refusing to let someone else's cruelty define her limits. Two people. One collision, both transformed. Not into perfect versions of themselves. Perfection was a lie sold by people who'd never actually failed at anything important. But into people who'd survived their worst selves and each other, who'd learned that redemption wasn't a destination but a direction, and who'd discovered that sometimes the greatest success is just being brave enough to keep showing up as something better than you were yesterday. That was the lesson. That was the story. And for both of them, it was enough.